If you want a man to fall in love with you and stay in love with you, he needs to feel these 5 things. Hello, my name's Matthew Coast, and welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to be talking about the 5 things that a man needs to feel if you want him to stay in love, if you want him to fall in love, if you always want him to love and be in love with you. Okay, so number one, the first thing that a man needs to feel is passion and or chemistry. And so he wants to feel excited about you and the relationship. If he feels like you're just a friend or you're just a roommate, or even worse, it's like he's bored with the connection. It's just not there. It doesn't really matter. He's not going to feel drawn to you. He's not going to want to pursue you. He's not going to want to invest in you. He's not going to want to do any of those things. So remember this: passion is created by polarity. So if there's no interest there, it's really difficult to create it. That's something that you kind of a lot of people are kind of confused at. They find some guy and they're like, "Oh, I want to create this passion with him, create this excitement, create this chemistry." If he has absolutely nothing there, it's going to be really, really difficult for you to create it with him. But if he's got a level of interest already, it's a lot easier to take that and build on it than it is to build on something that completely doesn't exist in the first place. So this also, what we're going to be talking about with polarity, it also creates unpredictability. It also creates mystery. And so polarity is the key word here. Polarity. It's powerful. And there are 2 types that we're going to be talking about. The first one is light and dark polarity. And so this is really having more aspects to your personality, pulling out different aspects of your personality that maybe you weren't pulling out before. And so everybody's got a dark and a light side. And so what you want to do is look at where he is, right? If he's a light side kind of a person, right? And light and dark is like, light is like everything's happy, he's kind of moving towards things, he's like passionate about life, he loves everything, right? And dark side's like the dark side of your personality, right? It's the dark humor, is laughing at things that you probably shouldn't laugh at, right? It's that like deep sexuality that you have. It's all that kind of stuff, right? This channel actually is more of a light side channel. Like the things that I talk about tend to be more light side types of things. Well, there's a dark side that we all have. I've got it too, right? I've got dark parts of my humor and my personality and stuff like that. And a lot of that I don't really bring out on this channel as much. And however, if you find that a guy's like that, where he's got all these light parts, you can start bringing out some of your dark humor, and it actually creates a polarity there, right? It creates this interest. It creates like, whoa, wait a second, right? And it's really exciting and it's fun and it can build on things. A little friction, a little disagreement, a healthy conflict can actually spice things up, right? So don't just always be agreeable and all that kind of stuff. Usually people that do that, and it happens a lot of times where people get together and they're like, oh, I'm going to try to be like perfect and have no disagreements and not bring out any of the dark aspects of my personality. And what ends up happening is that stuff ends up blowing up in their faces way later on down the line, because they start realizing that they don't actually know each other that well and all that kind of stuff. And so you want to pull out those different things. Don't avoid having conflicts. Don't avoid pulling out some of those parts of your personality, because those can actually create more attraction between the two of you. Does that make sense? The second part is masculine, feminine. This is the second polarity that we're going to be talking about, which makes him feel like a man. It gets him excited about you. It keeps that spark alive. And the best way to keep passion in a long-term relationship is through masculine, feminine polarity. It's the best way. If you want to keep him feeling in love with you, you want to keep that spark alive, keep that masculine and feminine polarity there. And it's really easy to do. Just, he wants to be a protector. He wants to be a provider. For those of you who aren't offended by the word provider, he wants to be a provider. He wants to be that protector for you. And so whenever you can, push him into that protector and provider roles. right now we're living in a society where women are being pushed more and more into their masculinity, and men are being pushed more and more into their femininity. And it's actually really relieving when you can get into a dynamic with somebody where you feel natural because you can be in this space that makes you feel natural, right? Which for the overwhelming majority of women is femininity, and the overwhelming majority of men is masculinity. And sometimes it might take a little bit of work to get there, just because, if a man has been in his femininity for a long time, it kind of feels weird, right? Not a place to be in your masculinity. And for women, it's the same thing. If you've been in your masculinity for a long time, it can feel weird and out of place to be in your femininity. But once you get there, it feels a lot more relieving and relaxing and stronger and more powerful. So if you can accept your femininity and his masculinity, he'll feel at home with you. It'll make him feel at home with you, and it'll create that spark, that passion, that excitement that you guys can have. That creates a lot of, it just feels great. Feels great. It draws him towards you. So number 2 is support. So this makes a man feel close to you. He needs to feel close so that he can bond with you, and that love can actually grow with you. And so he wants to feel seen, right? These are things that a lot of these things are things that women want as well, right? You want to feel seen. Well, men want to feel seen as well. He wants to feel like you get him and you know who he is. He wants to you to like and accept him for who he is. If he feels like he's a project that you're constantly trying to work on and fix and make into this perfect thing, you're building him into a chair or whatever, and you're going to sit him over there, and he's going to be this perfect on display thing that you're kind of building. He's most likely going to resist that, right? He wants to be supported for who he is. He wants to be accepted for who he is. And the second part of this is partnership. And what that means is it's something that I call the partnership principle, which is having someone who is on his side. He wants someone who is in alignment with who he is, somebody that he can see in the far distant future and be like, yeah, I can see us being together for a long time. You've got his back just like he should have your back. You're loyal to him just like he should be loyal to you. It's hard for a man to fall in love and stay in love if he can't see a future with you. It's easy for him to fall in love and stay in love if he can see that you guys are moving in the same direction in life together. It's really easy for him to fall in love with you that way. Number 3 is safety. So safety is it's one of those things where a lot of women look at men and they're like, you know, ah, you know, if you see that he's like, they'll. So I've had this happen a few times in my life where I'll like meet women and they'll like, just like they'll do all these weird kind of things where uh they're like breaking trust, or they can't trust men, or whatever it is, right? And almost everyone, man and women, has a wounded inner child that needs to feel safe in order for it to come out and be expressed. And if that inner wounded child feels safe, it's a lot easier for a man or a woman to fall in love with that other person, right? And so if he can't feel vulnerable, it'll be very hard for him to feel like he can fall in love or stay in love. And so you don't want to break that trust. You don't want to break that safety that he feels around you, so that he can feel like he can be vulnerable around you. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you? So trust is the first part of this, which is absolutely essential to any relationship. Without it, few relationships can survive without trust. And so what you want to do is avoid shady behavior, avoid any shady behavior. So flirting with guys in front of him, this should be common sense stuff. hiding things from him, lying to him. We get a lot of women on our channel a lot of times where they'll have guys who are doing these things, right? And it should break your trust. It should make you feel like you can't trust him, and you want to question why you're even with a guy if he's constantly doing shady behaviors, if you feel like you can't trust him. And if it's not about him, if it's actually about you, because a lot of times it is about you and not about him, right? Like for some men you're going to meet, they can't be trusted, or they can't feel trust for other people. And you want to make sure that you look for that from the beginning, right? It's one of the things that I talk about over and over and over in the Forever Woman program, is that you want to look at this relationship and say, okay, this is the goal, the relationship, not the man. And then move towards the relationship that you want and find a guy that's with you on that journey, not just find some guy and then try to fix him into being the right guy. That just doesn't work very well. So you want to avoid lying to him, all that kind of stuff, right? And instead engage in trusting behaviors. So show him that you're loyal to him when it's needed. Do things that you say you're going to do consistently. Support him when he needs it. Trust that he has your best intentions in mind. Trust that he's not going to go out and cheat on you. Trust him with your feelings and with your heart. And trusting in him actually creates trust in him. If you have huge amounts of jealousy, work on becoming a more secure attachment type. And if, like I said, if he's not trustworthy, then you should question being with him from the beginning. And the second part of this is acceptance, which this just means loving and accepting him and his past, accepting who he is now and not trying to change him, allowing him to get emotional and not belittling him for that, right? Like, this is what I was talking about earlier with some, like a lot of times I'd meet women, and there's a lot of women out there who will just bust on you, right? It's like this guy chick, that's what they call them out in the men's dating spaces, like the guy chick, right? Where you're like, oh, like, what are you, just a wussy, or whatever, right? And you just make fun of, like, you bust on a guy when he's being emotional, or he has things, because it's especially if you're on the eastern side of the United States, it's like a very, very common thing for a lot of women to do, is just bust on guys. And like, there's a certain amount of that can be fun and flirty and cool and acceptable, but there's a certain amount of it where if you can't get into just having normal conversations and allowing somebody to open up and be deep and all that kind of stuff, that's a problem, right? That's going to be a problem for you in any relationship, because there's not going to be a lot of depth there, which, maybe you just want a shallow relationship. I don't know. Maybe you don't. And if you don't, if you want something deeper, if you want something real, it's important to be able to have real conversations and regular conversations where you're not attacking each other, you're not busting on each other, you're not doing all those things. Safety is incredibly important, and it's often overlooked by a lot of women because they think that men are confidence machines. They're just running around. And it is actually true that women often have a lot more fears for their safety and more concerns around their safety than men do. And at the same time, we also need to feel safe. We also want to feel safe around you, especially if we're going to fall in love with you. So, number 4 is that he needs to feel ready. So men could not be, they might not be ready for a number of different reasons, right? He might feel like he hasn't lived enough of life yet, or he hasn't explored enough, or he doesn't have enough money to provide for you or be the masculine force in your relationship, or maybe he's not really ready emotionally, right? He might have some issues that he hasn't overcome yet that he needs to overcome, or maybe he's still stuck on an ex of his, right? If Here's the thing though, if a guy tells you that he's not ready, you need to believe him. Believe him. When a guy tells you he's not ready, it doesn't matter what his actions are. It doesn't matter if he shows you that he's, doing all these things or whatever. If he tells you he's not ready, if he tells you he's not looking for what you're looking for, if he tells you any of those kinds of things, you need to believe him. Believe him. Believe him. If he's not ready, you can't make him be ready. He has to make himself be ready. That's the only way that he can be ready. And you should not wait for him to be ready. If he's not ready, that's great. You can find somebody who is ready and who does want something and who's willing to get himself together. And when he does, if at some point he gets himself ready, then he can come back. And if you're not, in a relationship at that point, maybe you guys can potentially continue seeing each other. That's the place that you should come from around the readiness thing. Our number 5 is valued. We all want to feel valued. You want to feel valued. He wants to feel valued. Everybody wants to feel valued. And the reality is that for men, about 95% of men, this is their number one emotional need. Like the overwhelming majority of men, this is the number one emotional need that they have. And if he can get it from you, he won't look for it in other places as much, right? If you can be one of his main sources for this, then he'll just come to you for this instead of needing to go out and get it from other places. And the two different ways that we're going to be talking about for a man to feel valued is, one is respect. And respect is just about appreciation, right? And my favorite definition of appreciation actually comes from economics, where they say that to appreciate something means to raise its value in your eyes. And so you're raising the value of something, right? So you don't want to put him on a pedestal, but you do want to make him feel valued the same way that you want to feel valued, right? And so you just want to compliment him, give him appreciation, show him, find out what his love language is, and show him love in the way that he wants to feel love, and make sure he knows your love language so that he can do the same, right? And I know that by the end of this, there's going to be some women that are like, oh, well, what about what he needs to do? I get this all the time. And the answer is, you should both be building each other up. You should both be loving on each other. You should both be trusting each other. You should both be that's what a healthy relationship is it going both ways. It's you're building the relationship together. That is a healthy relationship. Nothing else is healthy. And so the second part of this is feeling needed. And feeling needed is him feeling like there's a space for him in your life so he can make you happy. He matters to you. He has a place in your life. Allow him to give to you. Allow him to express his love for you in his own way. Allow him to have a place in your life. That's what makes him feel needed. Right now we live in a time where society is devaluing men. And if he can feel valued by you, it'll be easy for him to fall in love with you, and it'll be easy for him to stay in love with you. And just remember this. Couples who grow together stay together. There have been a ton of studies on this and how this works, but be someone who brings the best of him out, and make sure you're with a man who brings out the best in you. If you can do that, he'll want to fall in love with you, and he'll want to stay in love with you. So number 1 is passion or chemistry. Number 2 is support. Number 3 is safety. Number 4 is being ready. And number 5 is feeling valued.